That is for like everybody, but you cannot draw. It's terrible.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
My name is Stephen Beauvais. I spent 4 years in the DC production department, where I pretty much did anything and everything they tossed at me. This was a great, great work atmosphere for anybody who wants to get into comic books. The reason I say it's great is because you touch on everything, from lettering to coloring, composition. The greatest artists of the 80s would walk into the production department and they'd start doing work or start helping you to make sure that their work was in a proper frame to go out to print. It was an extraordinary experience. But you learn a lot if you're willing to listen. And one of the first things I learned was about ownership of property, because this was a big, big concern in the 80s. Now, of course, it started more in the 70s. Alex will tell us more about that. It started in the 70s where people started to realize, wait a second, I'm starting to see this thing that I created on Slurpee cups, stickers, pajamas. Suddenly, the artists and writers were becoming aware that there was this whole other side called licensing. And licensing was where the money was being made. Forget about the motion pictures. Forget about TV. If you could put Superman's logo on a pair of underoos, you have made a fortune. All right, so this comes to what the topic of this discussion is going to be, which I'm going to kind of just touch on briefly because it's just a few of us. The idea of work for hire. This contract is readily available on the internet. You can find tons of contracts on the internet stating this very, very simple opening line under copyright ownership towards the bottom. The filmmaker, in this case we're talking motion pictures, the filmmaker, not the artist, owns the copyright to the work. That's an amazing statement right there. Because if you think about it, all these contracts are designed to do one thing: separate the artist from his work. When I say artist, I'm talking about this in the broadest terms possible. I'm talking about writers. I'm talking about musicians. I'm talking about people who actually illustrate. I'm talking about the entire creative process. Does the layman understand this? Absolutely not. Many creators don't understand this. They're thinking, well, okay, I'll make X amount of dollars per page, and I'll get the art back and I'll get it to sell it. But they don't understand that the 20 pages that they just turned into the company could resonate for years and years down the line. If you decide that you want to work for a Marvel or DC, then you know something, you have to accept their contract. They don't have to work with you. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of young illustrators out the door right now who would just die to draw Spider-Man and not care at all that they would lose the rights to their work for eternity, not just for a small amount of time, eternity. There are contracts, this one is not an example of it, there are contracts in place right now that actually state the following. In some contracts, it's written, the work provided by the artist can be used in any medium existing or to be created in the future.
Yeah.
I remember when
In
that
the entire
line first came out.
universe.
Yeah, when it first came up, because they were beginning to anticipate the web. That was it.
Not just that, they were anticipating marketing campaigns and strategies.
But I'm saying, what I was experiencing in the 70s in particular, and then in the 80s, was it was a whole battle about web content and who owned it if it was on the web, and then where some of the material we were creating in hard copy, who owned that once it went onto the web. And they began to say, oh, well, there's a potential of, and there was all these contract dates about we will own this work in any form it will appear in or might possibly. in anticipation of. And it was very threatening in a lot of ways to a lot of people. And as you said, some just had to grab it because I need to make money now. So I need to accept this contract now so I can get something coming into my pocket, my house, whatever. And it really wasn't, the big difference between the 70s and 30s and 40s and 50s was the 70s we now knew what it was we were giving up. And in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, well, you did work for hire. I mean, you just what everybody did, isn't it?
But you had the rare individual, like
Very
Bob
rare.
Kane.
Well, yeah.
Bob
yeah.
Kane was smart enough to understand that there was something more that was coming down the road. Now, he probably didn't have a glimpse of the idea of motion pictures and television. But he did understand that property was valuable. So he managed to strike a deal with DC as far as the ownership of Batman. His name would always be associated with it, and he would see some money. And he went on to almost be like a model for the idea of trying to secure some sort of copyright, some sort of piece to what is created.
And within the time period that he was doing this, you're right, there were rare individuals. One that comes to mind for me was not in comedy, was William Boyd. William Boyd played the Hopalong Cassidy character. Clarence Bulford wrote the original novels, but when they went to make a film about it, William Boyd negotiated not only himself into the role, because originally he was supposed to play a villain, but he recognized this character, which was more of a gruff kind of character, might become a role model for young audiences. So he affected how it was eventually presented to begin with, and then throughout the long series of years where they were making the film, he kept buying up the rights to it. In the 1940s, he was buying up TV rights, anticipating that. But again, it's not, the majority weren't thinking that way. And subsequently, that's what you're dealing with, not only in the 70s and 80s, but you're even dealing with now. Like you said, there's a number of artists who are coming into this industry dying for the opportunity to work in these companies and work on their favorite characters, and pretty much willing to give up all the blood they have in order to make that possible.
If you think about it in terms of the life expectancy of somebody who works in this industry, it's no more than 5 years. And then you have to pretty much move on, because new blood will always come in. When I left DC in the late 80s, maybe like 1990 or so, I could see that things were changing rapidly. The industry was moving into directions that were more based on collectability as opposed to content.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That hurt the industry for a great amount of time.
Oh, look.
But that wasn't the bigger agenda, because everyone was already fully aware, with the success of the Batman movie, that motion pictures was the way to go. When DC launched the Batman movie, I really didn't want to talk about the company specifically, but this is what I know. When the movie launched, the first movie, there was really very little communication between DC Comics and Warner's at Hollywood. There were instances where a group of us from DC Comics would run into the Warner Bros. People in various functions, see that they were passing around photos of the Batman movie in production. We'd ask, hey, can we have a look? And they would say no. We weren't allowed, because the product was more important than the people who were producing that wonderful book that it was based on. If you do your history, if you do your research, look up Batman's 50th anniversary. I was there for that. You will not find any mention of the anniversary. You'll see a little Batman logo with a 50 in it that I designed, by the way, in the UPC box. That was the only mention of the 50th anniversary. Why? Because Hollywood dictated, don't make a big deal about it. We're trying to do the movie. We're pushing the movie here. We don't want you guys to disrupt it. I'm not surprised.
I think maybe they didn't want Batman to seem old. They wanted to
Well,
seem
that was
new
always,
and fresh.
that's always been a major problem, and I think that's probably why we have 52.
Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely,
You
yeah.
know, because there was always this problem with numbers and age. And since I have moved on to marketing and advertising, I understand that.
Mhm.
I'm working for a company that has been in business for 60 years. I don't downplay it. I use the number, but I kind of get away from the stodgy terms that go with it. Because I want to make sure the company has this modern look to it.
Speaking as a bookstore owner, we have a very old clientele, and eventually they're going to pass on or move away. And we need to get younger people in and buying these things, and they will not pick up something that's a 600 something. They don't like the idea that they're going to have to read 50 books before they understand the story. And I think the New 52 was their way of saying, this is where you can all start. You don't have to read 500 comic books to get the story. Start here. And
My problem,
And it worked.
My problem with both Marvel and DC and their current content is that I couldn't give that to my child to read. I'm
Yes.
sorry,
Well, that's a-
violence.
when you take a character like
20
Starfire
I think a 20.
Yeah.
and you turn her into what she is now,
Yeah,
With
not
Space
good.
Force?
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm out.
Yeah.
But
I
the
can't
20-year-olds love it.
My
Well-
daughter loves the cartoon Teen Titans.
I know, they should.
She thinks it's fantastic. So when she saw the statue in your shop,
Yes, we
and
sold
she said,
7 of them.
"Who is that?" I said, "That's Starfire." She said, "No, it's not."
But we sold 7 of them, and we sold them to people in their 20s.
Here's the
So
thing,
that's
here's
the
the
most
thing.
popular
It's-
But we were
Yeah,
talking.
but-
But no, I'm not finished. When they, no, let me just say, I'm an owner of a store, so I'm telling you, I talk to the customers, and what I want to see is young adult comic books. And right now, think about it, Harry Potter, Twilight, these are young adult novels. They sell like hotcakes for most
House
people.
Night too, that they're making.
All
House
young
Night.
adult.
Right.
Why is there no young adult comic? Why isn't Corey that your daughter likes? Because that would be good for 12, 13, 14, 15,
Because
16.
the comic book industry, one, is no longer being run by book publishers.
No, it's being
That's
run by
one.
people who are looking for young
They,
adult
and book publishers understand genre and age. They understand middle grade and book and board books and YA, and they understand that. Comic book companies didn't understand, and didn't have to, because initially comic books
So
were
much.
all age. Once they started to move away from that, well, who's gonna bother with regulating that? No one wanted to, and now here we are. Reality check here is that everything reflects something else. So, our society reflects what we read reflects our society. And where we are right now is sex and violence at one of its highest levels. I'm not getting moralistic, I'm just calling it, you know.
That's only a certain
That's-
demographic though, because you don't see sex and violence in Harry Potter, you just see a lot of money there.
No, you see the money there. I see different groups going at it for different reasons. But what I'm saying is Harry Potter did something else. Harry Potter suddenly blew the publishing industry away, because prior to Harry Potter 1, Simon & Schuster, Bantam, Doubleday, Dell, and I was in the market at that time, all of them were saying kids don't read, we're screwed. They're only playing video games, they don't read, there's nothing. And what they were doing at that time, what publishing was doing, was creating books based on TV shows that had barely had a season. All right? But they're saying kids aren't read, we're going to die, we're going to die. Suddenly Harry Potter comes out, and now you've got kids and adults reading 500 to 800 page books, standing in line at midnight to get their hands on a book.
Yeah.
Did the people get the idea that maybe if we write good books, or books that are really engaging, that the
Yeah.
audience, then we'll get, no, they went, oh, witches and
Wizards.
warlocks and things, that's it.
Magic.
Let me address what Alice just said, because that's probably the most important point we can make about creativity, if you will. Content is everything. If the content isn't strong, then I think what you end up having is just a lot of gimmicks. You brought up in your lecture about science, technology, understanding how it works in order to make a character. That's all great. I'm all for it. But if you don't have that emotional content, if you don't have something that makes the reader connect to the character, it's a waste of time. If the newspapers are going to focus on the fact that Starfire is now,
Space War.
what are we going to do? How do we defend that? We can't. We can't. Back in the late 80s, when Sandman was just starting out or at its peak,
What, the Neil Gaiman?
yeah,
Yeah.
like it happened so fast. You got to understand, when I worked in the production department at DC, it was nonstop. I mean, there wasn't a weekend I didn't go home with 20 pages in my arm to prep for print the following Monday. That's how intense it was. But I was in a comic shop, and a woman came in. She went right up to the owner of the shop, put down this issue of Sandman, and said, "This is unacceptable for my son to read. How dare you sell this to him?" She didn't say how old he was. She just came in livid. Now the owner, of course, did the refund, and the woman left. It could have been a lot worse.
Oh yeah, she called the cops.
It could have been worse. We're getting away from what touches an audience, how we can reach out and actually get them to understand. Let me just backtrack a little bit. Let me just go back this far. There was a time where you could accept the fact that Peter Parker was having a sexual relationship with Gwen Stacy. You didn't see it. You knew it was there. But if you were too young to appreciate that, it didn't matter.
Right.
That's what we're missing. We're missing this ability to bridge a gap.
I can address this. What my problem is that the corporations or whoever's running this don't seem to understand that you can have multiple iterations of a character. You can have a charming Corey that a 14-year-old can read, and you can have the boobalicious one that the 28-year-olds can read. They don't seem to understand that multiple iterations is something that fans can understand. They actually had the nerve to say, you can't use Robin in your cartoon because it's going to confuse people because he's in a movie. And it's like, no, they will not be confused. You can have multiple iterations of a character. There can be a Robin in a cartoon. There can be another entirely different Robin in this comic book and another in this one and one in your movie, and they can all have a different backstory, and fans get it. They don't. Corey can be your daughter's heroine and can also be that stature. She can be those two characters, and
I think stylistically you're probably right.
Fans will totally accept it.
But personality, no, you can't. It's impossible. You cannot have two different personalities for the same character.
In two different entire runs.
That's where
in the young adult version, this is the young adult Corey. This is the not so young.
Compare Young Justice to the New 52, the Young Justice comic, which a lot of the people that I know actually enjoy more than what's going on in New 52, because it's. But you can have that, then you have New 52 for the new people. Kind of like with the Ultimate Universe and the regular Marvel Universe.
I was also going to say that in mainstream publishing, not to debate it either way, but in mainstream publishing, when I was in it really deeply with a packager, there was Hardy and Nancy Digest, Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew Digest, and there was Hardy and Nancy Drew Rack. Rack was for YA, 13 and up. Digest was for 12 and down. The difference, really, when you read the story, the mystery is still there, the personality interests are still there. The differences were subtle, i.e., no one drew a gun on the boys in the digest. In the Rack, people died.
And in Japan, they'll do the same characters they'll do exactly the same characters in a whole new movie set, and they'll have different stories. They'll be the same person, but the whole story will be different. They've done it with Obnoxious Aliens, like everyone's different. They've done it with, I can't remember the name of it, but they are not married to one character, always this. They'll change it, and the fans just go with it.
I believe they can change, and they need to. Though I disagree with the current looks, if you will, of the 52 and even Marvel's stuff. Underneath all of that, there still has to be that core person that we can relate to.
But I disagree with you.
Well, I think you're both saying the same thing.
Let me go back. When I first found out about Parallax, is that the name?
Oh yeah, Hal Jordan became Parallax.
Somebody was talking about this at a party, and I said, Hal Jordan? Are you serious? Because in my mind, I'm saying...
That was not your Hal Jordan.
It's not.
No offense, there's a whole new generation of people who have no problem with divergent characters, because you see it in anime all the time. You see it, they're fine with it. They're fine with, oh, okay, this time around he's a thief in that universe, and this other time he's a cop in that universe. But that's the character that they like. It's like fan fiction has begun mainstream.
In '78, when the first Superman movie came out, it was like a bit of a disconnect. What happened was that the comic book company didn't understand why the sales of the book didn't go up.
No.
They were confused because the movie was on #1 for many
So
weeks,
good.
and yet the books didn't budge an inch. Was it a matter of the character itself at that point being so dated that people could no longer respond to it? I mean, there's been several reboots to Superman, right?
Well, Smallville did well.
Smallville did very well.
But
God help
But
us.
Superboy did not do well. It was not as well written. It wasn't shot very well, and the actors
No, it was
sucked.
made on $1.95.
Yeah.
And they had two different Superboys, neither one of them were that great.
But they put money into Smallville, and they had compelling stories.
And they had
and it
good
was
writers
fun.
and so, but they also made it 90210 and One Tree Hill with superpowers.
Which was that era's
Because that's
what
what they
people
looked
was
at. They looked
interested
at,
in.
they
That's what
looked
kids
at
that age were interested in.
the demographics they were going after. The fact that they were well written meant also that some adults were watching it as well.
Yeah.
The early seasons, if you go into the later seasons, it starts going into
Absolutely.
all over the place
But
and then
did
just
it
played
affect-
all sorts of havoc with
But
it.
did it
watching
affect the
this.
sales of books?
Yeah.
Well, no, but see, that's the other thing too. Going back to mainstream publishing, which, again, we're both familiar with. I told you earlier, I said earlier that they were doing paperbacks of TV shows. And certain that, well, at least a TV show has a built-in audience, so that's a big advertisement for the book. And we'll get an audience. They're saying, what made you think that the people watching the TV show want to go pick up a book? They didn't.
Well,
They were going to watch their characters on the boob tube.
a lot of us did pick up books, and they were written so crappily because it was I'll give it to my brother-in-law to write. It was obviously
But
done on the cheap and the crap.
And I don't know which
But-
ones you picked up, but again, and I'm not debating
Well, I'm
that.
just
All I'm
saying-
saying that the overall attitude, not even so much the lack of quality to it, is you cannot assume that the audience that clamors for the movie theater is going to clamor for the book. It's two different fields of play.
Yeah, but it still has to be good. My point is, the Timescape books, the Timescape Star Trek books, some of them got on the bestseller list.
Mhm.
They got on because Vonda
friend who wrote
frickin'
one.
McIntyre was writing them. And the ones that were written by someone's brother-in-law, the Star Trek books, didn't have an audience because they were so bad. So you've got to have a level of professionalism. You can't think, well, I'll just toss off this book and put a cover of Spock on it, and they'll buy it, because they won't. It has to be good.
You also have to figure continuity too. Sometimes if you go into if you do something when it immediately comes out, whoever is writing the book or whatever hasn't seen the show. Like you look at some of the original Star Trek comics, how far off they are from the show.
An Italian wrote those.
Yeah.
He was cheap.
Yeah, but
They
the
have
drawings,
an Italian
drawing
comic.
too. If you look,
It
the
was-
Enterprise bridge looked different.
It was cheap and crappy. And
The characters were different. The way the Enterprise operated was
He had
different.
never seen an episode in his life.
Yeah, but it's also a case, if we get into an early episode, when Hamilton first did their Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they were writing Lord Zed, but at that point, the only episodes that had come out was the first season with Rita Repulsa, so Zed was acting like Rita Repulsa.
Well,
So
In
they
marketing.
hadn't seen that information
Right.
yet.
In marketing, we sit around and the first thing we try to figure out is how are we going to get our target audience?
Mhm.
How are we going to get them to believe in our product enough to buy it? How are we going to get them to make that product an everyday part of life? Now, with comics, we made a wrong turn. We got away from the general audience, and we got hooked into this idea that if we reach out directly to the fans, they would sustain it. That's not really what happened. What ended up happening was we ended up segregating the art form into a few choice locations where people could go to buy them. We got away from the newsstands. We got away from the Kmarts, the Corvettes, whatever was around during
you're
that
talking
time.
about my store.
We're talking about the fact that when I was a kid, my parents would come home and they would have Time, Newsweek, papers, and a bunch of comic books reading. They weren't reading them. They were 12 cents a piece. They grabbed them off the rack, satisfied my week's take. The point here is that it's no longer an accessible medium. We've gotten away from the basics. Do I think
not
comic
cheap.
shops are great? Absolutely.
not
I think
cheap.
it's fantastic.
We
that
can't
have-
afford to sell them for 12 cents a piece.
No, no, we can't go
You can't
back.
afford to make them for
We
12 cents a piece.
can't go back. That's obvious.
No.
But the people who are seeing The Dark Knight Rises or The Avengers, a lot of them have never seen a comic book. before I got married, I was dating women who'd never seen a comic. That was strange to me.
Oh, they're very, they don't like women, the people who put out comic books. They do not like women for some strange
Very
reason.
fond of women, thank you very much.
A lot, I'm talking
too.
about
My
that.
wife is one
I've
of
heard
them.
terrible things said about of when they had the young woman who became Robin, and terrible things were said about the women who were saying, "Why did you kill her in this disgusting, X-rated manner?" It didn't make sense. It was insulting, and then she's totally forgotten. And I heard a lot of hostility. We don't care, and the message was, we don't care about young women. We don't care about women at all.
Well, do you wanna
We
talk
get
about
little
Powerball?
girls in our store every week. I want to buy a Wonder Woman statue, and all we have is Starfire-esque statues, Babylicious statues, and parents cannot buy that for their children, and these kids are not interested. I really need to see, I need to see more stuff done for women. I really do.
Can I ask you a question?
They're very hostile.
How much effort is being made to affect that? I mean, not that I believe the big dogs will listen, but you know, you affect everybody that you're trying to get to. You hit them in the kneecaps, which in this case would be in the wallet. How much of a movement is there towards that? Because I do a kids Comic-Con every year. I'm very involved in not being a moralist or anything for everybody, but simply creating a venue where all age comics are available, where kids and teens and adults can come and look at a lot of great stuff and learn about the industry and have a good time. So ultimately, I'm always hearing and encountering individuals who either actually have quote-unquote kids or children or young people's oriented material, or say they do. And I see that invariably, except for people who are nuts like me and really give a damn about this, oh yeah, we're doing this. It's an afterthought. It's like the bastard child
No,
sort
we
of
have a
mindset.
children's section.
No, I don't mean
Yes,
that. I'm not talking about that.
We did that.
Look at how certain books that are for an all-age group are marketed versus the sensationalistic stuff. Okay? And the reality is, if you do not have somebody on the inside, if the company is not really behind the property, they're not going to hear you. You're white noise.
Yes.
No offense.
offense.
Okay. So the reality.
I think you've touched on something.
I hope so.
It's just that we're at a very, very strange place right now. Disney owns Marvel.
Yes, they do.
Warner Brothers has taken over DC Comics.
Absolutely. From the inside out.
And
It's not the
this is a very, very different and fragile time, if you will, because there's no doubt in my mind that you're looking at that Disney is actually going to absorb Marvel and they're going to spit it out in a decent manner. I see that happen. I think that will happen in 10, 15 years.
If
It's
that
going to be
long.
it's going to be unrecognizable
Yeah,
because Disney
I agree.
understands the value of these characters. They're already figuring out a way to get the Avengers into their theme park.
Oh, yeah.
The door is open already. The books that we once knew in the 60s and 70s, 80s, whatever, those books won't exist anymore. That kind of writing, that kind of mentality won't be there anymore because they're going to follow a Bible. Mickey's got a Bible. They're going to follow a
And
Bible.
isn't he a boring character? If you follow
Hey,
the Bible, it's the
hey,
most
it doesn't-
boring
it
character on the
doesn't
planet.
matter.
Nick and I are cool.
It doesn't matter.
Batman has a Bible. I followed the Bible.
It doesn't matter to an 8-year-old who simply wants to wear it on the pajamas. It doesn't matter. We're not, in many ways, we are taking a step back, but I'm sorry, I'm one of those guys that does not see any value to Starfire being a space war. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't either,
It doesn't
actually.
make
Although I
sense.
did like
Maybe it's
7 of
because-
those statues.
Maybe it's because I grew up with the first incarnation and I
Yeah.
kind of liked her. I don't know.
She was very risque for
Well,
her era.
Okay,
She was, but she was restrained as
For
well.
her era.
She was restrained as
let
well.
me
She's
also
considered
say,
boring.
let me also say this. I'm sorry, just because in my thing, in my presentation, I talked about the eras gone by. If you look at Green Lantern, when I say Green Lantern, who comes to mind?
John Stewart.
Okay, who
Alan
comes to
Moore.
mind?
Al Jordan, I know
Oh,
exactly
okay.
where you're going
Yeah, all
with
right.
this.
Who's the first Green Lantern? Alan Scott.
Hmm.
Alan Scott, blonde-haired. The lantern and the ring were magic, had nothing to do with the cosmos. Right? At a certain point, he's a Justice Society. That's the 30s, 40s, that's the 40s actually. And at a certain point, a change had come. Batman ran around with the bat with no moon on his chest for the
Right.
longest time. All right? He laughed when he fought crime. He had a good time. They were jollying. There was like Robin Hood and his merry men. And then he became the Jordan, which actually goes back to what he was like in the very first
If there was
year.
a Bible, none of that would have.
There is a Bible. That's what I'm telling you. And you know what happens? Every 10 years or so, it's a changing of the guards. It's a changing of the interpretation. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. Do you remember Wonder Woman in a suit? There was a period when during women's lib when she was in a suit. No special costume.
White suit?
Okay.
Yeah, she
So
lost
ultimately,
her powers and everything. And
it's
then-
going to happen, and there's nothing we can do about it. We have to sort of watch the ship sail. The big difference here, and this is where I'm going, because you can't stop it. What you look at is what's coming, and I think you're right. Both the companies that we grew up enjoying, and Marvel being the younger of the two, because Marvel was the 60s. The companies that we grew up enjoying, the material that they were generating don't exist anymore. And they were tied to publishing, which is not who's running it now. So we can just watch that ship sail. What we are looking at is the future. And as a retailer of a store, I don't know how this sits with you, but independents right now are the only ones who have the potential of creating some of the kinds of material we're talking about. Whether it's in print or digital, where that's going is a big question. But ultimately, that's what we're looking at. Are the independents and the smaller companies who nobody has swallowed yet going to be able to generate different types of material, a larger array of material that people can begin to find the things that we want? And then how do you build an iconic character in a year? You can't. It's going to take time.
Before you walked in, we were actually talking about this. Both corporations will always try to drown out the noise of the independents. But it's going to be the ones, as you pointed out, that are really of a strong quality. So that this way they'll be able to sustain themselves. And eventually work themselves away from the idea of just being independents. Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey, if you will. These were independent little things that suddenly blossomed because, as you pointed out, they touched their audience.
Right.
Which is
They
something
hit the sweet spot.
which is something that comics has forgotten. They no longer market to everybody. They just market to a core group. And as you pointed out,
Young male demographic.
and you pointed out something very strategic, actually. We're dying. We're in our 50s. We're going away.
They're trying to get the 20-year-olds in. Trying real hard.
But the 20-year-olds, they have a different agenda. This is the point I'm going to close on. What's different about this generation from previous generations is that everything is there for them in a very tiny little space, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone. Their information comes directly to them. They don't have to go anywhere. Music, movies, comics, it all just comes to them via a device that was predicted, as you pointed out, many, many years ago. The thrill of actually sitting down and reading the first Dune novel might be alien to them. They may not be able to understand it. They may not be able to get it. They want their product fast, they want it digested, and then they want it deleted. They don't put it on. They move on to the next pretty piece of candy that you put in front of them. That's the new generation.
Even look at the artists who, even some who are out there today, selling pages of the work that they did for a particular book. Many artists are now doing all their work on computers. So even that, which is another corridor of revenue, is gone. Yes, you can sell prints, but a print is not the original art. And so you won't be able to sell it for the same kind of money
No, but you
unless
can sell
you.
100.
But you see what I'm
You
saying?
can
though?
sell 100 of them.
But you see
But
what
in
I'm
the
saying
end,
though.
people want that. Real people, they want that. They want to be
Well,
able to take it.
People your age,
Oh,
but not their
no,
age.
there's still some groups
Well, you
that-
know what that would be then? There would be nobody buying, some of the masters' paintings and these sculptures and things
Nobody
like
is
that.
buying them. They cost too. I used to work for Christie's, and we sold the Van Gogh for $60 million. Yay, $60 million. Most people can't buy that, but they can certainly buy hundreds and hundreds of Van Gogh prints.
Yes, they would.
I wouldn't buy a poster. Cheap. So they're going to make it up in volume because now you can reach the entire planet. You can sell to people in Japan. You can sell to people in Buenos Aires.
But let me point out that we're talking about exceptions. you. We all know that anybody who wants to get comic books has stars in their eyes. They all want to be the next Frank Miller, or they want to be the next Todd McFarlane. They genuinely for that. But the reality, it's what, 1 in 50? 1 in 100?
If that.
What do you mean?
To
It was always that
to
way.
actually reach that state that you're talking about.
But it was always that way. It was always that way. It was always a difficult thing to attain. It's no more difficult now.
Well, that's not really true. If you look at the sales from Marvel Comics are across the board. Not just Jack Kirby, Don Heck. Anybody during that period, it stuck those for a nice chunk of change.
Yeah, but weren't there dozens and dozens of people who wanted that job and they didn't get it? I mean, there were lots of people who wanted that job and didn't get it. I mean, I think that's where it kind of...
I think what he's saying is, and I may be wrong, but here's the thing. For instance now, I know a lot of independents who are doing their own comic book, and especially I meet them at the convention and everything like that. I'd say maybe 1 out of 50 to 100, sometimes it's that extreme, has any real skill. I'm not even going to call it talent, just any real skill. Proportions are off, it's sloppy, it's crude. It's more like fan art, but they, in their head, see it as professional quality. So it's not selling, it's not going anywhere, okay? And you're right, lots of people, but
the good
years ago, they didn't have the option of getting it up on the web. They didn't have the option of getting it printed the same way. And I think we have more opportunities to get material out there. That means, yes, there is more opportunity for some people to make it. I think it's really going to average out around the same.
Which was always the way it was. Always.
But it's also going to be, what is the new playing field going to look like? And I don't really know right now. All I'm saying is I think the independent market is going to be an interesting place to be because I think that's where the variety is going to be.
We have a huge independent section, and we are different from many comic book stores because of that. A lot of comic book stores say, oh God, I don't want to carry that. It's only 10 copies, but we have a huge wall of independents because we think that's the way to go. That's a good way to go. And we have a children's section where we get them while they're young. And they were all asking for Wonder Woman statues, which cracks me up. It's like, sorry, I have no Wonder Woman statue for you. They don't sell where she doesn't look like a clipper. Sorry. It's like,
In closing, because I knew that, you see, this topic, it's boring to people to actually want to come in and sit here and talk about it. Once you get started, it's almost impossible to stop. But
No.
and also it has no ending. We don't know where it's
Yeah, but
going.
that's
No, but
the
in a
other
way,
thing about the
We're
statue.
all in our 50s-ish.
Yeah, sure.
We do not know what the 20-somethings or the 10-somethings are going to do. We don't know what the 10-year-olds are going to do when they hit their 20s.
They don't know either.
No, but they'll know when they get there.
There will always be comics. I'm convinced. There will
I
always be
agree.
comics.
It's a handful.
It'll be lower numbers, of course. It'll be more expensive, but it'll always be there. And I don't really think it's something for people to worry or stress about or have long debates about. It's endured this long. It's going to keep going. Will the digital component come in? Absolutely, it has to.
I think of
That's the only way
digital.
we're going to reach people.
I think of digital as, in my opinion, free PR. Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, thank you for saying that.
I've
That's
heard
all the
people
internet
weeping.
is.
When we went to the DC Dog and Pony Show, some guy in the back said, he was crying. You got to do something about this digital. And I'm thinking, you're an idiot. That is going to get the young people in, and having the comic book in your hands is a different thing. The collectability of it is something that will also attract them.
And diversity too. There's a lot more different styles out there because
Yeah.
I know people who are make comics so small, Diamond don't even carry them, but they still make a living out of it because they are well done comics. They are
Mouse Guard.
Yes.
No, Mouse Guard gets collected by Diamond. I'm talking about. Have you ever heard of something?
Before that.
Before
Okay, go
that,
ahead.
but yeah.
Yeah, if there's like stuff called, it's like a graphic novel called The Front.
Yep.
There's one called John Oxbow, Man Out of Time, just named 2 that I know of.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people have heard of that. And there's,
I do think there's always room
But there's-
for talent, and it may not be in DC and it may not be in Marvel because they may find that it's a little too draconian. Because there's no great talent at Hallmark cards, but they sell a lot of cards. But no one's a really great talent there. And I think DC and Marvel are going to be like Hallmark cards. There'll be a lot of stuff.
That's an interesting conversation right there because you know what? When it comes to the idea of creativity, when it comes to the idea of writing, when it comes to the idea of music, I'm sorry, what your iPad and your iPhone can do doesn't interest me. What interests me is what you can put down on canvas or what you can put down on paper.
But that's you.
Because-
No, that's what he's saying, that's what he's saying.
What I'm talking about are traditional values. If you lose the traditional values, you know what? You deserve what you get. Because let's face it, right now, 80% of what's out there, calling itself comic books, is crap.
I like to think of it as drawer fix. It's stuff that, because there was a lack of communication, the internet made it easy to pull your drawer fix out, your drawer art out.
There is nothing easy.
All that stuff used to be drawn, it's just that no one got to see it. It was in someone's
There's nothing
bedroom
easy
drawer.
about the creative process. It's an exploratory function. So when I sit at my drawing board at 2 a.m. and I'm pushing out, trying to find something organically, not digitally, that's where it's at. That's
all
where.
that crap that you're seeing is stuff that was always there, you just didn't see it. There's no means.
No,
of
there's
keeping
always been
it
crap.
out.
We know that.
There's always been crap.
You're sitting on it in your back room, right?
It's just no one,
Listen, I'm sorry, I was just fascinated by going out there and finding that there was a trade paperback for the Dazzler.
no, darn.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Back then it was crap. I don't care how you package it now.
It's still crap,
It's
yeah.
still crap.
Yeah.
Crap.
It was just packaged
We
crap now.
sold something called Bag O Crap, where we took 10 of our worst comics, threw them in there, and we printed out a little label that said Bag O Crap, and it sold like hotcakes. We had like 10 of them.
Well, haven't there always been those really, the movie is so god awful, it's funny?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Bag of crap.
Bag O Crap.
Unfortunately, it seems to happen more in our medium than anything.
Yeah, well,
Do you
that's-
remember Doc Savage?
Oh, no, please, see, I
People
forgot
love.
that.
My husband has a painting of one of the covers. He loves Doc
The
Savage.
book or the movie?
The movie.
The book.
No, the book I'm okay with, the movie was painful.
Oh yeah.
The movie was
It
unbelievable.
was done by someone who didn't understand
It
the
was
concept
root
of
canal
Doc Savage.
with a power
They didn't
drill.
I couldn't even sit through it.
The companies are really kind of going out of their way to shoot themselves in the foot.
Oh yeah.
When you create a character, I'm going back to Starfire, she's my prime
It
example.
takes a Joss Whedon to make the Avengers.
By the way, do you know he was supposed to do Wonder Woman?
I know, the
And
guy
they-
who said no got fired.
Yeah. They said, no, we're not gonna do it with you. Oh, okay, I'll go do the Avengers.
They fired that
The
guy.
last thing I want to touch on, I
Yes,
really
'cause
mean
you
it this
were-
time,
yeah.
and I really mean it this time, the last thing I want to touch on
Tell us.
is that we have a responsibility to the new generation that's coming in to draw comics. And a part of that responsibility is to teach them the difference between fantasy and reality. Look, it's great for everybody to run around in costumes at conventions and run around. Look, I was at Barnes & Noble 4 years ago. My wife and I are in there, and I go to the graphic novel section. There is a guy with a samurai sword, 22 to 25 years old. What did I do? I grabbed my wife, and I got out of the store. Reason being, how do I know what this guy is going to do with a samurai sword in a public place? We have a responsibility to teach our children, our creative people who are coming into this industry. There is a line. That line's always been there. You want to break rules? That's fine by me. Just don't hurt me in the process.
Oh yeah.
Agreed.
Listen, guys, thank you very much for coming. This is the kind of thing that I really like, where you just get a few people together and we talk and we just try to
Called
find
an
out.
intimate gathering.
Yeah, we just try to
Yeah.
figure out where things are going. But we already know the answers to a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
It's just a matter now of going out and spreading the word. Hopefully you and I will get together in the future.
Yeah, are you up here or?
Yeah, I live in Connecticut.
We need to, what time is it? Because this is closing at
3:14.
That's it, yeah, well, that's why I was trying to shut it down.
So I gotta.
We're done.
Nobody's back on my gate.
I'll be fine.